Broadcast, it's taking the world by storm. People are cutting the cord to their high cable bills and moving away from streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, and others for something better. Q Broadcast. For just $60 a month, you'll get access to every channel you could ever want, including HBO, Cinemax, and Stars. And the best part? There are no contracts, no hidden fees, and you're free to cancel anytime. With Q Broadcast, you can enjoy streaming live TV, movies, and top series on up to 5 devices at once. Whether you're at home or on the go, Q Broadcast makes sure your entertainment is always at your fingertips. Imagine being able to watch all your favorite channels from anywhere, anytime, without any restrictions. We're talking about thousands of movies, hundreds of TV series, and a huge library of live channels, all in one place. And don't forget video on demand and pay-per-view events. Those are included at no extra cost, so you'll never miss a big event again. Now, take a second and think about your current cable bill. You're probably paying anywhere between $100 and $300 every month, locked into long-term contracts, and hit with surprise rate increases. With Q Broadcast, that's a thing of the past. It's just $60 a month. No contracts, no extra fees, no hidden costs, and no price hikes. Why juggle multiple subscriptions like Netflix, Hulu, and cable when Q Broadcast gives you everything you need in one convenient package? People everywhere are switching to Q Broadcast, saving money and getting more content than ever before. So, what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description and sign up for Q Broadcast today. Just $60 a month, no contracts, no hidden fees. It's time to take control of your entertainment and start streaming smarter.
We live in a world where men are told it's harmless. It's just entertainment. But let's stop lying to ourselves. Pornography destroys. It weakens your spirit. It dulls your drive. And it robs you of what real intimacy is supposed to be. Every click is a step away from the man you're supposed to be. We can't call ourselves leaders if we are slaves to a screen.
As someone that is prior service, I know all about discipline. And discipline isn't out there, it's within your mind. Porn rewires your brain, weakens your will, wrecks all of your relationships. It doesn't just stay on a screen, it invades your marriage, your confidence, and your actual purpose. As men, if we don't learn to discipline ourselves, we'll be ruled by our impulses. Now, it is time to stand up and take control before this silent war takes more than you're willing to lose.
Real men don't hide in the shadows of shame. We step up and we protect what's ours. We fight for our wives and kids, our own hearts. Twitter isn't just an app, it's a weapon. It's a tool used to break free and start living like the man that you're meant to be. The battle's here and it starts with you. You can stop living in shame and you can break free today.
Here at the Eugenics Age, we know that these times of uncertainty are stressful. It is incumbent upon all of us to put our fears first and bow down to government tyranny. Gone are the days of freely leaving your home, working, and social interactions. In exchange for safety, we will trade liberty. At the Eugenics Age, we understand. However, just in case you want to get off your knees and stop being a sniveling coward, check out the John Age Project at anomicage.com.
Meet Ann Morrissey, who is here with her daughter, Dareth. Dareth is 17 years old. Mrs. Morrissey, I don't have to tell you that most parents would be extremely depressed if their daughter came home one day looking like this. I assume that was your response shock, anger, depression? What was it?
I was extremely angry. I really went bananas.
Yeah, how old was she when this happened?
Possibly 13, 14 years old.
We're talking like it's a disease, isn't it?
Well,
Yeah. How did she explain it to you, Mrs. Morrison?
there was very poor communication until we went into counseling. And it almost broke up our family. But through counseling and Serena, I can understand it better.
What do you understand?
That she feels like she doesn't want to be like everyone else, and she wants to be her own person. And through the dress code and her lifestyle, she's expressing this. It doesn't conform with our rules, but we're learning to cope, and it's a very, very difficult thing. Extremely difficult.
Dareth, let's let you talk for yourself. You're from Long Beach, California.
I just can't handle being like everybody else because that's what everybody else wants, you know. Just because somebody else does something does not mean that I have to do it. You know, I have my own morals and ideals, and I go by them.
Are you drug-free, Dareth?
Yes, I am.
Is this a political statement, then? Do you have some misgiving about the society that you see?
Yeah, there's a lot of problems, you know. A lot of the people are really aware of what's going on, you know, and I don't like it, you know. There's a lot of problems.
What?
I don't like the way society is based.
What bothers you? Give us some of the misgivings you have.
The rich, the poor, the people starving, the wars, you know. Why can't, you know, everybody just get along and just live their life?
Talon Real and Chevy.
Propagating truth in a world of lies. You are listening to the John Age Project.
Trust no one. Trust no one. Trust no one.
You found it. You're here. You're headlong down the runaway train that is the Anomic Age, and I am your host, John Age. Happy to be back with you once again, coming at you in the not so wee hours of the PM in the afternoon today, hailing proudly from the coastal plains of the old North State. Please check out anomicage.com if you've not already done so. Please like all the likes, subscribe to all the subscriptions, paypal.me/anomicage, patreon.com/anomicage as well. That's the best way you can help me, help the show to grow, and all that good stuff. I won't waste too much time with the preface today. We got a great guest. We got Mr. Scott Schara with us today, so I'll keep it a bit abridged. Scott is a nationally recognized expert, commentator on medical murder agenda in America and the dangers of incentivized healthcare. Scott's research proves that this practice of medical murder is by design. The father of Grace Schara, a 19-year-old with Down syndrome who died at St. Elizabeth's Hospital. Scott is on a mission to spotlight the crimes of the American medical system. Thank you so much, Scott, for being with us, sir.
Well, thanks for having me back again, John. It's been a while since I've seen you.
I know. I couldn't believe it had been that long till I was looking at our last show. It was like in the 100s, and we're way beyond that now. So thank you so much for the time. I can't say that enough. I know you're a busy man, and we are too. So thanks for being with us, man.
Well, it's good to be here. Looking forward to getting into the details to wake people up.
Absolutely. I mean, I thought I was pretty on point with this stuff, and I started kind of going down the proverbial rabbit hole a little bit last night, kind of doing the show prep, and And I was like, man, it's even worse than I thought. I knew about some of the death pods, the MAiD they got going on in Canada. And then I started looking into this stuff, and it's like, holy cow, we got 12 states in America that are on those same lines doing this medical assisted suicide. It's so bizarre. It's like the Dr. Kevorkian stuff from the 80s and early 90s. Nothing's new under the sun. It's just that repeating satanic process, it looks like. I don't know what else to say about it. It's just evil, man.
Well, that's right on. And, what's the difference between America versus Canada is that in Canada, the information is available. So it's right out in the public. They're not trying to hide the MAiD program. In America, it's all stealth. So they hide what we beat Canada to the punch by decades. So it's just all hidden. And, so what do I mean by that? Well, look at Obamacare. March 23rd of 2010 is when Obamacare became, quote, the law, end quote. And I'm saying the law because it's legal. That doesn't mean it's lawful. Only God is lawful. So it became legal on March 23rd of 2010. If you peel back Obamacare, you'll see Section 1553 legalized euthanasia. It's just they don't tell us that. And I'll give you an example. So you mentioned the 12 states. Well, it's actually in all 50 states, but I'll just give you a very pointed example. In 16 states, there is no legislation that requires a hospital to call the next of kin. So they're called not next of kin states. So if you ended up in a hospital today, and if you don't have your medical power of attorney, assuming you're married, you want your wife to be your medical power of attorney, if you don't have that document in place, and like Wisconsin is a not next of kin state. So if you don't have your medical power of attorney in place, you end up in a hospital and they deem you incapacitated for any reason. 2 doctors can label you incapacitated. In Grace's medical records, 2 doctors labeled her incapacitated without my knowledge. We found that when we got the medical records. So 2 doctors can label any patient incapacitated, and then they have zero responsibility to call the next of kin. So they take over 100% of the decisions for you when you're in the hospital. And we've been programmed through decades of programming to believe that the Hippocratic Oath is first do no harm. Well, that's not true. The Hippocratic Oath is an oath to satanic gods. And so, but we've been programmed that it's first do no harm. We trust the doctor. Decades of programming get us to think, well, they're doing things for our best interest, but they are not. So, this should not surprise people. What you're seeing now, I just saw it right before I got on the show. They're promoting a bill in the House to stop unilateral organ harvesting. So then what happens? So you'd think, oh yeah, that's a great bill. Well, that's also part of the deception, because the people who caused the problem are now promoting the solution. So you have, okay, that gets us into the trap that we think, oh, wow, legislation is going to fix this problem. No, legislation can never fix morality. You cannot contract or legislate morality. This is a heart issue where the general population has been programmed to believe in collectivism officially since 1905. And I'll just say one more thing before you go on. So what happened in 1905 is the Supreme Court case Jacobson versus Massachusetts became legal. So another, quote, law, end quote. So just the whole concept of precedent is unlawful. There should be no such thing as court setting laws. But the Supreme Court in 1905 in Jacobson versus Massachusetts said that whenever there's great danger, the government or whatever body is in charge can take steps to protect the general population against the individual. So it's for the good of the population versus the good of the individual. And that's called collectivism. So that's, if Jacobson versus Massachusetts did not take place, they would have never been able to pull off COVID. So the mask mandates, the mandates to get the jab, all these things are under the umbrella of Jacobson versus Massachusetts from 1905. But on a practical basis, what Jacobson versus Massachusetts has done is said that non-contributing members of society don't deserve medical care. So if now you become disabled, have dementia, you don't deserve the same medical care as somebody who's healthy and contributing to society. And that's what collectivism is about. And the general population has bought that hook, line, and sinker. So we end up participating in our own demise.
Man, that's so crazy. The Jacobson versus Massachusetts 1905. We need to flesh that out a little bit more, because I tend to believe that this has got a heck of a lot to do with eugenics, because 1905, we're still in the throes of the eugenics movement. We're still doing forced sterilization of people that have been deemed mongoloid and moron, all these different pejoratives that you see, in language today. People don't realize that a lot of these terms really come from that eugenics movement, where they were just saying, okay, well, this person's of low IQ, they're low ilk, we don't want them around anymore. We'll sterilize them. And as you were saying, we'll deem them incompetent. So then the medical mafia can swoop in and do their legislation of morality ad hoc, sort of on the side there.
Yeah, well, that's right on. I'm going to read out of the Supreme Court case so that we start with that as a stake in the ground for this discussion. So this was what one of the justices wrote in support of the 7-2 decision. Quote, "The rights of the individual in respect to his liberty may at times, under the pressure of great dangers, be subjected to such restraint to be enforced by reasonable regulations as the safety of the general public may demand." So when you hear, end quote. So when you hear that, it seems okay. If you're not a discerning person, you wouldn't realize that that is satanic. And God is an individualist, not a collectivist. So you wouldn't even pick up on that. So it's subtle, but that stake in the ground became the anchor point for eugenics today. So eugenics is alive and well today. I mean, I know it firsthand with my best buddy, Grace. Grace had Down syndrome. She was only 19 years old. In the medical records, John, there was a statement that asked the question if Grace was a VIP patient. Yes or no? And they checked no, she's not a VIP patient. And we saw, of course, with the lawsuit, that the idea of how they treated Grace, just for review, people can go back to our first show, but ultimately, Grace was given a combination of meds, Precedex, lorazepam, and morphine, that were given to her after she had overdosed previously. They completely ignored the fact that she had side effects that were a consequence of giving her Precedex that are labeled in the package insert for Precedex. They ignored that twice, gave her 3 contraindicated meds, Precedex, lorazepam, and morphine, in a 26-minute window after her blood pressure was already undetectable per the medical records. And when it came time to revive Grace, they refused to revive her because the doctor had put an illegal do not resuscitate order on her chart. So all of that, we had an overabundance of evidence at the trial, but yet the spirit of collectivism reared its ugly head at the trial, because what happened at the trial is the experts for the defense said all of those things that happened are normal, and they're considered the standard of care for somebody in an ICU. So then the doctors have no responsibility to provide informed consent for any of those meds. In fact, the doctor can unilaterally put a DNR on a patient without consent, without a bracelet, without a witness, without a signature. All of that was sold to the jury by the defense, and the jury bought it because of the programming of collectivism. Grace had Down syndrome. And I of course believe that was a key factor as to why she's not here today. Not only the VIP in the medical record that I just mentioned, but in the 22 doctors' reports that we received when we got the medical records, they mentioned Grace had Down syndrome 36 different times. Down syndrome as a I guess you'd call it an abnormality. I'll call it a normality, because Grace was more normal than anybody I've ever met. But anyway, Down syndrome as an abnormality or a defect, that they test for, results in a 90% abortion rate, which is baby murder in America today. And the studies from what happened during COVID relative to people who had Down syndrome in hospitals. There was a study of 1.7 million patients over 825 hospitals, and they determined that if you had Down syndrome, based on the medical records, the ratio compared to somebody without Down syndrome, a Down syndrome person had a 6.3 times more likelihood to have a DNR put on their record compared to somebody without Down syndrome. So this idea, it's like I said, in the United States, it's stealth. What I'm telling you, and what people are going to hear this for the first time, and it should shock them to the core. So why do I say that? The low-hanging fruit right now is the disabled and the elderly. We are, each of us is one car accident away from being disabled, and all of us, assuming we live that long, will be elderly. So we're all going to be subject to this eugenics agenda that is alive and well in America. In fact, we're leading the charge.
That's a really sick thing. We are leading the charge with this. I mean, I hesitate to go too far into my story on this as well, but I know exactly what you're saying because, my father and father-in-law both kind of in that same situation the last few years. And you don't realize it until you're put in those situations, because immediately if they're on any kind of life support, then it's, well, how long do you want to prolong this? How long do you want to deal with this, basically? And like you said, it's the elderly, it's the people that are quote unquote abnormal. They're the first ones to go. And I've heard a lot of the same stories from people that are younger. If they get put in that scenario, if they can take their organs, it's like, oh, well, he's unconscious. He's been unconscious for a couple hours here. How long do you want to, let's look at these forms, because, he's an organ donor and we might be able to help X, Y, and Z. And before I get aside, I was going to throw this picture on the screen there because the Death with Dignity website here puts these the states that we mentioned, and it's just so ridiculous. It's all in the wording. The Death with Dignity. Yep. They always want to package this as something that's palatable, something that's for the greater good. You're a bad person if you don't check organ donor on your license. Well, they're old. Why don't we just let them fade away? It's always packaging as something very palatable and a moral decision, which is just ironic.
Right. The CARES Act, right?
Yes.
So the PrEP Act, which provided immunity from liability. It sounds like we're preparing, right? But it provided immunity from liability for doctors and nurses who killed the patients following the countermeasures. It's always that way. Have you ever heard of the term bohica? That's what I look at. Yeah. Okay. So that's what I call all of these terms that are deceptive. So bohica stands for bend over. Here it comes again.
I like it.
So that's all of them. Okay. So I forgot my train of thought there for a minute. So I wanted to go through one more example with you. Anyway, keep going, John.
I didn't want to throw you a curveball. It'll come back.
It'll come back to me. We just got off on a rabbit trail.
But yeah, I mean that's just so disturbing to me is how they package this with the propaganda as something palatable. And if you look at the old sci-fi movies, I was looking at Logan's Run and even Soylent Green, these classic movies where it's basically saying, okay, well, once you reach a certain age, it's better just to go on out to pasture. After all, it's a young man's world, and we don't need you around anymore.
Oh, I know what. Now it came back to me now that you said that. So on organ donation, I interviewed a lady, Dr. Heidi Kessing. She, I'm on a mission. She's on a mission. She's on a mission to expose the brain dead fallacy. So this idea of telling a family that the loved one is brain dead, that opens up the organ donor situation. And so these organ donor teams are right there ready to pounce on the family in the hospital. Yeah. So anyway, I interviewed her on my podcast, and it was I didn't know a lot about organ donating at that point. My jaw was dropping just listening to her explain how it works. It was mind blowing. But what I did, it was something that caused me to take immediate action. So I immediately afterward took my wife and I off the organ donor list because, unsuspecting when you get your driver's license, like when you're 16 years old, the first time you get your driver's license, I want to help people, right? So you just check that box thinking, well, that's good. Okay, well, that becomes a contract. And that contract overrides any medical power of attorney. It overrides everything. So if you are on the organ donor list, you just need to get off. And I'm not against organ donating. That's not what the point is. What I'm against is that they use that as the excuse to do nefarious things to people in the hospital.
And they prey on the people that just don't know any better. I mean, that's the sad thing. Like you just said, you're making these decisions at 16 and these things might haunt you for the next 60 plus years. And you don't even realize it. Like you said, you're in your 50s or 60s, you just have a fender bender and you never know when you're going to get taken out by the medical mafia there.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I hope people, when they hear this, what I think happens most of the time is people will hear something like this and then their life takes over and they don't take action on it. But what we're talking about requires you to take some action. Get off the organ donation list, get your medical power of attorney in place, have an advocate who is awake. It's critical. You cannot survive a situation in a hospital or a nursing home or an interim facility without having an advocate. Now, I'm going to give you a case in point right now. My wife, her name is Cindy. She has been taking care of a lady at a vent weaning clinic. She happens to be disabled. She's 60 years old. And in this vent weaning clinic, she ended up being on a ventilator. They didn't take her off of it in time. Now she's got a trach. It's a whole barrage of errors. Ultimately, through a series of events, she got captured by Adult Protective Services. She was on her own. Adult Protective Services capture her, and then they take her through the court system and assign her a state guardian. Okay, so they call these people then wards. So this person is a ward of the state. So now the ward, my wife starts advocating for her. The family had called us, asked us if we would help. She was in the same hospital that Grace died at. My wife and I went to go visit her in the hospital. This was before the trial, but after the lawsuit was filed, we were in the lady's room visiting with her. She just had gotten out of surgery, so she couldn't talk, but she could acknowledge us. My wife was showing her pictures on the phone. All of a sudden, 2 armed guards showed up and escorted my wife and I out of the hospital, telling us we're not allowed in this hospital. So just wrap your head around that. So now my wife starts advocating for this woman, and you would think that the state guardian would love that, right? Mm-hmm. He's got somebody with boots on the ground, can give him live information regarding her condition. He called the I forgot the term. It's somebody from the state. There's some state advocate that supposedly is involved with patients. Anyway, that term will probably come to me. But anyway, he called and asked that person from the state to have my wife removed, to not advocate for the person. So we took it to the next step and got him removed, and my wife became the replacement guardian for this person. All right, so now we got a bird. We're in the system. We can see what is going on. It is unbelievable. So now this lady gets $1,600 roughly a month from Social Security and disability. The facility that she is in takes everything but $55. So she gets $55 a month to spend on things that she might want. Like she likes to take pictures, to develop her film. She likes ginger ale. The facility won't provide ginger ale. So, how long does $55 a month go? but that's what is going on. Yeah, my wife has saved this woman's life 3 times by stepping in. They're constantly wanting her to take vaccinations. My wife stops it every single time. But I mean, these people who don't have an advocate in a facility like that, they're going to literally jab them to death.
And this is so insane. I never thought the term ward of the state applied after you were an adult person. I mean, that's just so insane. You think of ward of the state, you think of like a child that the parents have died in an accident and they become, and you can't even, man, I don't even know what to say on this. How do you legislate your way out of this? I mean, if you're an older person and you happen to be alone, is there any protection to keep from getting confiscated by the state? I mean, this is Soylent Green all over again. They just don't have the trucks going, the trucks are on their way. The trucks are on their way. That's not here yet, but it might as well be.
Yeah, that's why I tell people, I get asked a lot because of what I'm doing and what I've researched, how do you prepare? And, you can't beat them at this game. It's way too embedded in society, so you are not going to beat them. So we use their documents against them. You have a medical directives document, you have a power of attorney, but your key, there's never been a document that's going to save your life. I mean, we had medical power of attorney with Grace. She still was killed. Mm-hmm. So it isn't going to be a document that saves you. In fact, I would just be I'll just tell you bluntly, if I replayed what happened with Grace, first of all, I would have never taken her to the hospital, because I was programmed to think that a hospital is a safe zone. But assuming that she objectively needed to go to a hospital, Grace would be alive today. And the reason is because I know how to advocate today. So the difference between back then and today, I'll just spell it out so people know what I'm talking about with advocating. Back then, I thought my job as an advocate for Grace was to be there, as a comfort, for one, to just talk through things with the doctor, the nursing staff, if they had questions, but overall to submit to their authority. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's really critical. Today, if Grace was in the hospital, the roles have to be reversed. The doctor and nurse submit to your authority. You are in charge. So I would explain what the rules of engagement are. I'm renting a room from you. I'm purchasing your services, and these are my expectations. And if you don't follow them, I will fire you and will move Grace to another hospital. It's that blunt. So that's the reality of an advocate's role. And it doesn't have to be that you're in a fight with them, but you need to. It's like did you ever have a substitute teacher when you were in grade school?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I mean, if the substitute teacher didn't establish the rules of engagement right out of the chute, I mean, the guys like me would, we would own the substitute inside of 10 minutes, right? The substitute had to establish the rules right away. And it isn't a mean thing. It's just, hey, this is what my expectations are, period. So that's what an advocate's job is. And then I would say, what's the most important thing that somebody can do to prepare? And this will sound shocking when I tell you, but it's to get comfortable dying. Our fear of death has us submit to all kinds of foolishness. Think about how many people were convinced to take the COVID jab. It's because they created a boogeyman, generated fear, and people took that jab out of fear. So our fear of death causes us to do things all the time versus trusting God. So you got to get comfortable dying. And the only way that I know to do that is to put your faith in our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the ID thing. I got to talk to some people close to me about that one, because, I mean, like, I couldn't even believe you told us this one, and I don't want to go backtracking too much, but like your ID, this thing you signed when you were 16 will supersede anything that you've said, that your spouse said. They'll go back to this saying, well, Laura signed this when she was 16 saying she wants to be an organ donor. So, forget about you, John. We're just going to go ahead and proceed with the plan here.
It's unbelievable when you hear that and see it. Just so if people want to find out how to do that, my podcast is called Deprogramming with Grace's Dad, and that can be linked from Grace's website. OurAmazingGrace.net is the website, and you'll see there's a tab for deprogramming, and then go back to the it was maybe 2-3 months ago max, when I recorded the interview with Dr. Heidi Kessing, and we laid that out. And then there's links in the show notes as to how to get off the organ donor list.
Yeah, I'm putting that on the screen for him right now, the Rumble link to Deprogramming with Grace's Dad, just so you folks can check that out. Please do that.
Thanks, John.
Man. So the good news is there's nothing we can do to protect ourselves, really, except be the best advocate we can be and try to delouse ourselves from these parasitic things like the organ donor card.
Well, and don't get duped by the quote solutions end quote that they throw out. Process how fickle the general population is. Think about if gas went down to 99 cents a gallon, what they could get away with. They're constantly creating these deceptions so that we take our eye off of what's really important and what we should be focused on.
That's the truth. Good grief. I feel like everything, I was talking to somebody last night about this. I didn't even ask them or prompt them. They were just like, yeah, and every time I turn around, there's something else, going down. I was like, yeah, man, that's why I try to, it's difficult to do a show like this and to some extent be topical without just getting into the darkness. But it's so true that you kind of just got to cut some of this mess off as much as you can, because there's always the next big thing. It's the next big thing. This shooting, this storm, this disaster, this food shortage. It's a game of Pong where they just keep wanting you to go back and forth, and I think kind of miss the forest for the trees, so to speak.
Do you know who Jason Christoff is? You heard of him?
The name sounds familiar, but I couldn't place him right now. No.
He's a mind control researcher. He's been doing it for 30 years. And so he has studied how they program us, not just on a macro level, but on a micro level. And one of the phrases that he shared when he was on my podcast is that they do everything in their power to keep us watching the tennis match so that we can't see what's really going on behind the scenes.
That's so true. And I think it wears the individual down to the point where they're just so apt to submit to the medical mafia. You know what I mean? That's the biggest one that I think that touches everybody, because we're all going to be born and we're all going to die. So, I mean, that's the one that everybody's going to say, well, they took 7+ years of school in X, Y, and Z. So they know better than me, the brain dead status, or they know better than me, if it's time to check out, as it were, with this sort of, getting your death pod and just fade into the abyss, I guess.
Well, and that's part of the process of becoming deprogrammed. Once you realize, so they do have 7 years of school, but what if it's 7 years of programming? Mm-hmm. Then, in fact, you're going to know better than them as long as you keep asking the why questions. Think about what a child does. A child keeps asking why. So, I mean, I think about Grace all the time with that, because she never, even though she was 19, she kind of stayed around the 10-year-old attitude level, which was fantastic. So, she was always inquisitive. And, the whole electric car thing, we never got into it with her, but I just picture her saying to me, well, Dad, I don't get it. Why are people buying these electric cars? And I said, well, it's because there's government incentives. There's all this stuff. And then she would ask me, where does the electricity come from, Dad? And I would have told her, and I could just see her saying, well, that's stupid. I mean, it's so insane how people think they're saving the planet by getting an electric car. I mean, oh my goodness.
It's so wild. I mean, the audience is tired of me saying this because I've said it so many times, but when I was a lot younger, I used to see a bumper sticker that said question authority. I don't see those anymore. I just don't see them at all. I mean, it's so hilarious. I think that was kind of more synonymous with the left, but now nobody seems to question anything, from the latest psyop of somebody getting shot or not shot to the boogeyman of the next big disease. It's just like everybody's just going, yeah, okay, let's do this all over again. It's really bizarre.
Yeah, so they've set up a couple of permanent boogeymen, which is very important to understand. I mean, they set up virology as a permanent boogeyman, so they'll keep playing that card over and over and over. The boogeyman virus, reaction, fear, solution, vaccine. Virus, fear, vaccine. It's just over and over and over. They're going to keep playing that card. So that's a permanent boogeyman. Another permanent boogeyman is China. They get us believing that China is our enemy, which it's convenient because then the real deception can keep happening. Another boogeyman is communism. Think about what our country really is. I mean, we have an illusion of freedom. But what is it real? Think through what happens under that illusion of freedom, and we'll call it the American dream for argument's sake. Under the illusion of the American dream, in order to participate today, the husband and wife both have to work. So then, in order to get free indoctrination into the public school system, the child has to get 80 jabs just to enter the doors. And so then the child becomes a lifelong participant in big pharma. So that's the American dream. That's the illusion of security, or the illusion of freedom that they've given us. And they've done it under the premise of the state turning over our birthright to the state. So the illusion that the state is providing safety, security, and comfort got us all into this accomplice mode of participating in the evil. We are all guilty. We've all participated at some level in that game of turning our rights over to the state. The government will take care of us. And I believe the answer to that question is repenting of each of our participations in it and then getting out. And I'll just give you a specific example for me personally. Voting was, I used to get involved with politics, for example. So I'm completely out of that. I don't care anymore. When the stuff comes up and people ask me, I don't care. I mean, it's just a complete deception to get us thinking man can solve a spiritual problem.
Mm-hmm. That's the truth. I'm glad it's not just me. I hate to say that again, but we were talking a little before the show. I'm glad it's not just me. I'm just checked out of so much of the political realm. And I think that's kind of why I backpedaled a little bit from the show. It all just became too dark and too ridiculous. It was just like people actually think that, candidate X is better than candidate Y or something. And so much of it, just like you said, is that spiritual problem that has decayed the whole culture of America. Like the culture of America, I think some people think we're still at 1950 or something, the glass half full people, and then the other people think we're in 1984, the glass half empty people, and then there's me who's going like, man, I don't know what the bleep this is, but it's kind of like that George Carlin thing. Yeah, the American dream, you got to be asleep to believe it, and I think that's that's kind of the truth, man.
Interestingly, I recorded, it just got posted on Rumble. I did a podcast on Venezuela, and I played the George Carlin clip about the American dream as part of that podcast. Yeah. And he was a classic. He was telling us the truth. He did it in a funny way, but I mean, he actually knew.
Yep.
He knew that we were being deceived. So
it's so crazy, man. Well, I don't want to get us too sidetracked. I know you've got, is the government legally killing us? I'm going to put that artwork online, on the show here so the folks can see that one. I love the artwork, by the way. Is the government legally killing us by Grace's dad, Scott Schara?
Well, thanks, John. Yeah, that what happened is after the trial, so the trial ended on June 19th, and I have a hard time sitting still. And so I was starting to get back into, I had taken 4 months off for the trial, I had been working with the legal team regularly, but it only took about 25% of my time. But then the 3 months plus leading up to the trial, I worked every single day, 7 days a week with the legal team prepping for the trial. So I couldn't do anything else, but I had started a series called Escaping Babylon. And so the world is Babylon. And so to escape the world, you've got to see, okay, what is actually going on? So I started this series called Escaping Babylon. So I wanted to get back into that series, and God put on my heart, write down everything that you've learned so far regarding this physical agenda. And so I started doing that, thinking it's just going to be a Substack article. and I got it done. I had a couple of people review it. One was a doctor, because I wanted to make sure it was technically accurate, and she encouraged me to do a book. So then all of a sudden it became this process to do a book, and it looks like it's going to get released in the next couple of weeks. We are finishing up the final proof. So I edited the final proof yesterday. It's exciting. It's an interesting process to write a book. It was fun to write it. I enjoy writing anyway, but the editing process and all of that, it's intense. I'm glad it's done. The book, it's a fairly easy read. For somebody like you, it would be more of an introduction to what's going on, but it connects all the dots. And I had one of my good friends review it. He said, "Scott, you brought all the receipts and you didn't pull any punches." So I'm calling out what's going on. I brought the receipts. So then what I'm hoping is that when the people who are awake read the book and say, "Yeah, everything is in here. That's right." And then they'll pass it on to somebody who's not awake, because I think it's written from the perspective that it's a gentle way to bring somebody who's not awake into the fold.
Yeah. I don't know how to ask you this one without getting too into the legal side of things, because I don't want to foul up anything that you got proceeding wise, but what was the end game with any of this? Was there any resolution? I mean, like we kind of talked about before, there's kind of no legal resolve to any of this, but
do you mean
are we still like in litigation for this? It sounds like an ongoing process. It seems like, anyway.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I got to zoom out a bit to get people to understand why we would even file a lawsuit, given, I'm awake to,
Yeah.
All right, so if we zoom out to the biggest picture that I'm aware of is in Revelation 13, God explains that there are two beast systems that Satan runs the world with: the Antichrist beast system and the false prophet beast system. So we already know from just you and I talking, the medical industrial establishment is in the Antichrist system. It's evil. Right? The false prophet gives the perception that it's good, but it's actually less evil. So the false prophet side is actually worse than the Antichrist side, because it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. But still on the Antichrist side, then we have the legal establishment. So way back, this would have been time-wise, it would have been January or February of 22. So Grace died October 13th of 21. So I just thought, okay, yeah, we're going to file a lawsuit. After I reviewed the records, it seemed pretty obvious what happened. We're going to file a lawsuit. So then I did a bunch of things. I ended up being introduced to an attorney that is a partner in a 300 partner firm, so a monster firm. And he said, "Scott, this is a big case. I'm going to introduce you to the best medical malpractice attorney in Wisconsin." So he did. I talked with that man, and he told me, so I sent him the records, and he said, even in slam dunk cases like this appears to be, you only have a 1 in 10 chance of winning at best. So I thought, okay, what's the reason? And he said, "I'm going to share a story with you to explain why I said that." And so he said, I represented a family where the husband died after a surgery, and the surgeon had sewed a sponge up inside of the husband. And he said, "We lost." I said, "How is it possible you could lose that case?" He said, they circle the wagons around their own. So he said, "I had one expert, they bring in 10. So then, they have a bunch of experts, and they end up refuting your expert, and then the jury's left to decide." And that same thing happened in Grace's case. So now let's just walk through. So that kind of sets the stage. On April 11th, so what happened? So we had already decided we're not going to do a lawsuit, and then a series of events, and I believe it was God's providence to say, "Hey, I want you to file this lawsuit." I didn't know why at the time, but I believe now it's crystal clear is the purpose of filing the lawsuit and taking it all the way. We were never going to settle. So the goal was to take it all the way. Let's see what happens. And we lost 11-1. So the jury decided 11-1 against us. And so I think that was a gift in the perspective of waking up the population. God cares about souls. And so when people have this illusion of justice, and they see in a case like Grace's that, oh my gosh, how did you possibly lose? Anybody who watched the trial was live streamed. So anybody who watched the trial saw that, we had a better team, better experts, better evidence, everything. And yet we got slammed 11-1 with the decision. So it's insane that type of thing could happen. So anyway, the lawsuit then was filed April 11th of 23. There was a number of motions to dismiss, a whole bunch of them. Ultimately, the entire case went to jury trial. So we had 5 claims. We had a wrongful death claim. We had a lack of informed consent, medical malpractice, battery, and a declaratory judgment for the illegal do not resuscitate order. So all 5 of those claims went to the when they all didn't survive to go to the jury. The battery and the declaratory judgment ended up being pulled out before the jury heard it. But all of those were heard at the trial, all those claims. So that was a miracle in and of itself, to be able to get to a jury trial, because at any point that case could have been thrown out. But it got to the jury trial. One of the things that went against us. So the jury trial ended June 19th. Well, I filed a motion for a new trial on October 29th because one of the things that went against us happened in the pretrial on May 20th, where the judge denied our motions in limine. So motions in limine are the things that both sides want to restrict or make sure are in the trial. So we had gone through all the defense's motions in limine. We were talking about the trial being live streamed, cameras in the courtroom, all of that stuff. And our team was explaining to the judge, I did a lot of interviews, and I did an interview with the local paper. The judge was frustrated with that, visually and, in his words. And, he said, there's going to be consequences and they're going to be against the plaintiff. So then it came time next to hear our motions in limine, and he unilaterally denied them all without hearing them. So our motions in limine were to prevent my religious beliefs from coming into the trial and to prevent the research that I've done post Grace's death from coming into the trial. So all that came in. So we knew we're in trouble at that point because, the defense is going to paint me as a whack job to the jury. Praise God that I'll give you an example why I'm saying it praising God for that. It stood unrefuted during the trial. So when I was on the stand, I was asked about the incentives for ventilators, and I was able to share how the Health and Human Services Secretary unilaterally declares a public health emergency. Then the FDA comes up with countermeasures, which includes a ventilator. The average stay on a ventilator is 22 days before the patient dies, the $39,000 bonus, the $300,000 payday after the 22 days. I explained all that on the stand. Mm-hmm. None of it was refuted. So that trial testimony stands as the truth. And in some of the clips of the trial, over 1 million people saw it. So, people had a chance to hear the truth for the first time in a trial setting under oath. So in that regard, it was fantastic. But, Grace did not get a fair trial because of that. Think about if you're on a jury and you hear somebody saying that, the FDA is your enemy and, all this stuff. But that's what they heard, because it was the truth, and the judge allowed that in the trial. So anyway, I filed a motion for new trial on October 29th. There was a hearing on December 19th, just a little over a month ago. The judge denied the motion for new trial. So now we're sitting at the point that, all the legal things are done unless I would choose to appeal that decision. And at this point, I'm not choosing to appeal it.
Mm-hmm. Jeez. Yeah, I hesitated to ask because I didn't want to mess up anything that was going on, but that's just intense. And I got to think, kind of like you said, anybody that questions authority now has been deemed a heretic. And I wonder if, I'm trying to think a few steps ahead with a lot of this stuff. Because if you look back, even like 15 years ago, the average person didn't know as much as we do now. If you want to go down the Rockefeller-based medicine, the Flexner report, the vaccines, the good grief, all this different stuff. And I kind of wonder sometimes if this wasn't being exposed, so that a vast swath of the population could be then deemed incompetent. So if they get into that scenario, you know, they're 65 and have an accident, they get in the hospital and so forth, whatever the case may be, then they can say, oh, well, look at his posts here. You know, Scott made some pretty disparaging remarks towards the Borg system, so he seems incompetent. We'll just take him away to the death pod. You know, I kind of wonder sometimes how much all this knowing is actually going to be crippling when the proverbial stuff hits the fan, you know?
Yeah, I had just last week, one of the people I met that is she's done a whole bunch of homework on this. She ended up going in for surgery in Kentucky, and I asked her, she texted me, and I had said, did you use an alias when you went into the hospital? Because, you know, I think I told my wife, I was probably 3 months ago, I had been diagnosed with heart disease about 7 years ago, and I told her, you know, if I have a heart attack, just let me die. You know, because I'm not going to get a fair shake, obviously. I'm number one on the kill list at the hospitals.
Yeah. I mean, just what you said about your daughter, Grace, having is not a VIP thing on the records. I mean,
right. They're so brazen.
What the bleep is that, you know?
Exactly. Shouldn't everybody be a VIP?
Yeah, everybody's paying with the same money, allegedly, to get in here and get this great health care. I mean...
Yeah. No, I know. The stuff is shocking. When I'm reviewing these records and I can hardly, you know, it's like... Yeah, you'd think they would want to hide that, right?
Yeah.
But it's right in the records. Yeah.
I got to wonder what the heck's on my medical reports now, you know? I mean, it makes you wonder why this stuff's so hard to get a hold of sometimes. Your actual medical records, you know?
Yeah. No, that's right on, John.
Good grief, man. Well, where else would you like to take us, Scott? I mean, I got a million rabbit holes we could go down here, but I don't want to leave anything on the table that you had to get into. So I'm trying to not steer you away from what you wanted to get into here, man.
Well, I don't have an agenda, but, you know, what's on my heart is... The two things that I consistently like to speak on is the physical agenda. So we spent a fair amount of time already on that, but also the spiritual agenda. You know, in the spiritual agenda, a simple way to look at it is through, I mentioned earlier, evil versus less evil. And this is how Satan runs the world. There's only two choices. God's way is always outside of the two choices that we are presented with. So, you know, take the political realm. I was talking about this last night, and in the political realm, you know, they present us with two choices, right? Democrat, Republican. And, you know, so the Democrats, so we were talking specifically about the election in 2022 with Ron Johnson against Mandela Barnes in Wisconsin. So Mandela Barnes believes in the woman's right to choose. So then they can have a full-term abortion, and we might as well call it a full-term murder.
Yeah.
So then Ron Johnson believed in the first trimester murder. So then you're voting for the lesser of two evils. I mean, they're both murders. It's just a matter of degree. Mm-hmm. So then that should show you the system is designed. Now you're in it's called a dialectic. You're in that dialectic that, okay, I'm between these two posts that they artificially created. They have nothing to do with what God's way is. God's way is always outside of these dialectics. And I would say on the spiritual side of things, it's the most important thing that I've learned since Grace's death. In fact, how I learned it is in July of 22. Remember, Grace died October of 21. And, you know, I started, you know, I already had gone through the medical records in a lot of detail. And I was on, at that point, several hundred interviews. And God put on my heart to not share Grace's story to expose evil. And if you read Ephesians 5:11, it says, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. So I knew that. I mean, looked it up in my own Bible, and then I dug, and I didn't know why I had that impressed on me at that time, but I know now why, because that is an NIV translation. So when translations are made, they change things. So if you go back to the Geneva Bible that was done in 1599, the word is reprove evil, not expose evil. So why is exposing evil wrong? Well, because if you process this on an esoteric basis, so remember evil versus less evil, on an esoteric basis, Satan has to have the evil exposed to create chaos. So Hegelian dialectic, problem,
order out of chaos mess, yeah.
evil exposed, chaos, solution, false prophet, angel of light. So that's what's going on. And so that's why I don't want people to get duped by these false prophets, like, the new king, the HHS secretary, they're all false prophets. How do I know? I'm positive they're false prophets. And I don't have to know anything more other than the reason I know is they never acknowledge how we got here. So consequently, repentance is never part of the solution. So they are, they're talking about, customized vaccines, the whole border control psyop. Both sides want open borders. Process it. They're moving us towards a new world order. So a new world order is one world government, one world religion. So they have to have open borders. So then they can promote the central bank digital currency, the digital ID, because that solves, we got a voting problem, right? So the whole voting thing is a complete psyop. But in order to solve the voting problem that most people believe in, so we can't have illegals vote. Assuming, just think about it, if our vote mattered, they wouldn't allow us to vote. Just process that, right? But they can solve all of this. They can have a digital currency, digital ID, and it'll solve all these problems. So that's why both sides want this. But one side is open about it. One side is a wolf in sheep's clothing. So they get this idea that, we got to have ICE do all of this protecting of the border. And, then they create these situations like in Minneapolis. So then, we can further divide and conquer potential. If they can create a civil war, that would be golden for them. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I bring this up because the only way that we cannot be deceived is if we have our own stakes in the ground. And so when we have our own stakes in the ground, it's called being grounded, then we will not be deceived. I mean, God says to test every spirit. So if you realize if somebody is not talking about repentance and they're talking about solutions without repentance, legislative solutions, can't contract morality, it's all a lie. Think through, I have not seen anybody yet point out the executive order scam. Trump is issuing executive orders constantly. Those are all illegal in their own system.
Absolutely.
But nobody wants to talk
about it. I've said it before on this show. It's kind of like, do you want to get shot with a 22 or a 308? That's kind of where we're at. Do you want the shotgun or the 9mm? I don't know what the difference is at this point, because it does seem to be kind of the same mess. There seems to be, and here's something, to touch on kind of biblically, there seems to be so little discernment going on, because right. I see a lot of these ops, and I've commented on this so many times on social media, like, who's falling for this mess? And then there's millions of people that seem to just be, what are you talking about? They're aghast that you would dare question the legitimacy of known liars that just keep running the same sort of ops. It's just really, really weird.
Oh, that's right on. That's right on, John. Thank you for letting me just spill that. I mean, I'll give a couple more and then, we can wrap up. But, dig into, do an etymology on the word mega and see what you find out. And people will be shocked. I mean, they parade it right in front of us. And I believe that is happening because of Genesis 18:17. In Genesis 18:17, God said to Abraham, shall I withhold from Abraham what I'm about to do? And this is before he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So the purpose of God letting us know is to empower and protect us. I believe Satan is bound by that same principle. But the reason Satan lets us know is so that we are legally bound. We tacitly approve. So when we rah around mega, hey, don't you know mega means sorcerer? Don't you realize mega is the highest degree in the Church of Satan? Okay, but people don't do any homework on that. So now we've tacitly bought into the concept and we just accept it. So, on that legal ground, Satan thinks his hands are clean. I talk about that in my book, by the way, a little bit on that topic, just so people get at least a taste of what's happening. So I think that's important for people to understand. The other one, the other deception for most evangelicals is Israel. That's just a huge deception. They've been brainwashed to think those who bless Israel will be blessed by God. That's another complete deception. I've just started writing my second book, which that's going to be part of the second book, which the first book is titled, Is the Government Legally Killing Us? The second book is the Church Spiritually Killing Us?
Amen
and
to that.
The Israel deception is part of that.
110%. Thank goodness you said it. My goodness. That's so spot on. And so much of it is just hidden in plain sight. I mean, just like the medical symbol, quote unquote, is the intertwined snakes.
Yeah.
I mean,
the caduceus.
How much clearer do they have to say it, people? It's
exactly.
not for your
right
benefit.
there.
It's
right there. Right.
It's so wild, man. Well, thank you so much, Scott. If you'll hang out for a minute, I'll say goodbye to you off the air, but please plug anything and everything you want to. I'll put your links back on the screen for everybody as far as your deprogramming with grace, as well as that artwork for your new book too.
Sounds great. Yeah, eventually that will be available to order on Grace's website. Once we got a few more hoops to jump through, but then we'll get that on Grace's website so people can order the book there.
Okay, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Scott. We'll plug your website one more time. How can they best follow you? How can they best be a part of things and hook up with your podcast and everything else?
The best way is go to ouramazinggrace.net. In the upper right-hand corner, there's a little link that says subscribe to our newsletter, and that's my Substack. I do a Substack fairly regularly, once every 2 weeks approximately. So that's how I post all the recordings from deprogramming and the research I always post on Substack. So that's the best way people can follow.
Okay,
Thanks for having me on today, John.
OurAmazingGrace.net, folks. In case you missed any of that, everything will be in the show links, so please check that out. Well, please stick around for a second, Scott. I'll say goodbye to you off the air, sir.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you so much again for your time.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, folks, thank you so much for being with us. I hope you got a lot out of that. Please rewind, pause, go back and catch all those little bits that you might have missed if you're driving down the road or at the gym or what have you. As I always say, you can't do everything, but you can do something. So please try to get out there, do your part, and make a difference. And I'll be seeing you sooner than later in the Anomic Age.
Thank you for listening to The Anomic Age, a John Age project. For past shows, further info, and to comment, go to anomicage.com. That's ANOMICAGE.com. Till next time, thank you for listening to The Anomic Age.
Thank you.